Y'all, first of all, I just want to tell you, appreciate y'all having me. To have me as a speaker implies that I have something worthwhile listening to, so I'll let y'all be the judge of that after we get through. But y'all, the talk today is about the American lawn. What, the stuff that as kids you used to see your kids out there mowing the lawn, which you never see that anymore. But what I want to talk about is the environmental ramifications of the lawn, how it evolved to get here, and mostly why it's a bad thing. Y'all, you hear first of all, is this coming through on the speaker? Okay, perfect. Y'all, we're hearing a lot of stuff about bees nowadays, colony collapse disorder. The European honeybee is going away. It's a big problem for everybody, or at least they think it is. It's really not that big of a problem. That's really just another non-native, as an ecologist, it's just another non-native insect out there competing with our native insects. So y'all, but the problem out there is habitat loss. Our native plants are just going away. Where are they going? Well, they're going under houses and freeways and shopping centers and restaurants. And just exactly, I'm going to talk about why that's a problem and what we can do about it. What we can do. Who's heard of Doug Tallamy? Bringing nature home. Only one person in this room's heard of Doug Tallamy. Well, he's talking about native plants and what's happening to all our pollinators and native insects and stuff. He has this new book out now called Nature's Best Hope or something like that. And what his contention is that nature's best hope now is the rewilding of urban areas, which I can tell you right now that won't work. Because we can't recreate the diversity that we find in native prairies or native ecosystems. So, but having said that is not the answer. It's a very good option for us, because we're fixing to talk about the American lawn and what it represents, and just what you can do to change that and create some wildlife habitat. Ladies, am I in y'all's way from seeing this? Okay, perfect. Well, y'all look right here. Does that pretty much look like the typical American house right there? There it is. Lots of lawn and lots of shrubs around the house that don't do anything. Y'all, number one that's thing so stupid about this is all the money that we put into that crop, which is the biggest irrigated crop in North America, is the American lawn. But here's what we do. We spend money growing it, then we pay somebody to come cut it and then throw it away. That's how smart we are. So y'all, everybody likes acronyms. Here's a big old acronym for you. I'm going to start this out. And here's the real problem with the American lawn and what it represents. So here's the profound introduction, okay? And here's your profound acronym. I'm going to talk about the VPNP-NPRD, or the very profound native plant, native pollinator relationship dynamic. And I want y'all to know that in your landscape, what you should be going for is high plant species diversity. That's going to really do. But what are we talking about here? The whole problem with what we're talking about with habitat loss, we're talking about the coevolution between native plants and native pollinators. And so I could give this talk in China, Japan, Germany, it wouldn't matter. The same principles apply. Wherever you live in North America, we're interested in North American pollinators and North American native plants. That's our ecosystem that we live in. So let's talk about that, the coevolution between pollinators and flowering plants. The coevolution, what is that? When the change in one biological object triggers a change in another biological object. If a flower changes form, if a plant used to grow 5 feet off the ground and its fruit was at 5 feet, now it's grown 10 feet. If you can't evolve to be taller to collect that fruit, you're probably going to go hungry. It's just one kind of broad example. I'll get into some better ones in a minute. But let's talk about this paragraph right here. If you don't remember anything else about what I talk about today, here's the principle that you need to be aware of and pay attention to. Flowering plants, we call those angiosperms. They represent 1/6 of all described species on Earth. That's not all described plants on Earth, that's all described species, every living thing. In the terrestrial environment, and here's the connection that we have to make, okay? As adults, it's going to be harder, but we have to make it with our young people, because it's going to affect them more profoundly than it affects us, okay? In the terrestrial environment, the environment that we live in, that we require for our survival, just like any other critter out there, and there's the disconnect. We think we're either too smart, that what happens to the environment won't affect us, or if it does, we can overcome it. We cannot. We are as dependent on that environment out there as birds, snakes, lizards, everything else, okay? You gotta believe that for this to make any sense to you. And y'all, normally when I give these talks, I'm talking about flowers and everybody's all happy. Well, this is a serious get down, I gotta be ugly for a little bit talk. So in the terrestrial environment, the interactions between flowering plants and other living organisms are dominant factors in ecosystem structure and function. These relationships underpin all nutrient and energy cycles by providing food for a vast range of animal herbivores. And the majority of angiosperms use animal pollinators to achieve reproduction. So y'all, of the flowering plants worldwide, there's approximately 12,000 genera. Okay, that's the genre, that's the genus of the plant. Like in the salvia, that genus, there's about 800 species worldwide. So there's a lot of species involved here. But so of the 12,000 genre of flowering plants, here's what we think and pretty much know pollinates these genre. About 500 are bird pollinated, 250 are bat pollinated. About 875 of the genre are abiotically pollinated, like our grasses. Usually it's wind that carries that pollen. No insect or bird carries that pollen, wind. But look at the remaining 10,375 genre are insect pollinated. That's 86% of all flowering plants on Earth require an insect to pollinate them. That's a big number. That's huge. And insects are the first critters that are compromised when we start degrading the environment, okay? Bad deal. So y'all, here's what we're going to talk about in this topic today right there. How much lawn is there? Where did the dang thing come from? What about the American lawn right here? And then what the impacts are. So we'll get through this. And y'all, when I was putting this together, I must have been feeling pretty artistic because the fonts and the colors on here is like a psychedelic acid trip. So I apologize for that. How much lawn? From a 2015 NASA satellite study, conservatively, there's about 40 million acres of lawn in the United States. More acres of lawn in the U.S. than 8 of the largest irrigated crops combined. So you're talking about corn, about 10 million acres, alfalfa, about 6, soybeans, you can see the numbers there, and then orchards and all the rest. But lawns, it's not even close. Look at all the irrigated cropland that is represented by the American lawn. All that water, which we'll talk about that. But look where they're distributed. Look, always around an urban center where people have their houses. I guarantee you, country folks do not water their lawns. This is city folks who think that they've got to have this lawn for a lot of different reasons. Here's how it all started. The first lawn care manual dates to the 13th century. It's been going a long time. It may have originated as a grassed enclosure in medieval settlements for grazing as distinct from fields. So if you wanted to have a grazing animal close to your house, it was a little spot by your house because the field out there, it was plowed and crops were grown out there. So this is a little spot for little grazing animals, something functional. You ate that animal. It didn't have a name. We didn't, because once an animal gets named, it never gets eaten after that. So in the 17th and 18th centuries, the garden and the lawn became a place converted for walkways and social areas. They were made up of meadow plants. There wasn't any sod farms growing turf grass. And in the early 17th century, the closely cut English lawn was born. By the end of this period, the lawn was a symbol of aristocracy. It showed that the owner could afford to keep land that was not being utilized for a building or for food production. So you were rich if you had land that didn't have to have a building on it or didn't grow food. And let me tell you something, that closely cut English lawn, there weren't lawnmowers. That was some dude out there with some sheep shears shearing that ground off. That's exactly what that was. That was done with hand tools. See that bottom part down there? Nobody would do that today, and we'd be better off for it. So when labor became a non-factor, lawns became more common. Here's this dude, Edwin Budding. He invented the first lawnmower in 1830, and this made it practical for the less than wealthy landowner to keep lawns because you didn't have to have a whole cabin full of slaves out there that had to get their shears out to every time you mowed the lawn. No, one guy could do it now with a machine by himself. So now the common guy could have a lawn. After the invention of the lawnmower, the middle-class families across England, in imitation of aristocratic landscapes, began to grow finely trimmed grass lawns in their back gardens. Beginning around the 1860s, the cultivation of lawns became a middle-class obsession in England. The new fad of lawns and the machinery with which to economically maintain them quickly became an influence across the Atlantic. So here it comes, an American obsession. Y'all, I'm not creative, but this was y'all are looking at my most creative deal. And it had to be red, white, and blue. The first colonists noted that native grasses were inferior for our cattle and introduced European clover and grasses. So here came introduced turf grasses because they were improved. So a long time ago, y'all, and all over this country, 30s and 40s, they were going to put in improved pasture. Yeah, all over Texas, all over the country, taking out native grass, putting in coastal and all this stuff that required lots of upkeep. We'll get to that. Most of these grasses spread quickly ahead of the colonists. Bermuda grass became the most important pasture grass for southern colonists. So Bermuda grass goes back a long time ago. Kentucky bluegrass is native to Europe. Why do we call it Kentucky bluegrass? I have no idea. Or the Middle East, and in the USA, it's the most popular species for lawns. In 1938, legislation created the 40-hour work week. This was a pivotal factor in the spread of the lawn. Until then, Americans typically worked half days on Saturdays, leaving little time for lawn work. That's where your kids came in. That's why you had kids, so they could do the lawn work. Well, I swear to God, my dad was raised on a ranch, and he knows his parents didn't have kids because they liked kids. It was because they needed farm hands. Anyways, they had time now to focus on lawns or lawn maintenance. This law, coupled with the housing boom post-World War II, made the managed lawn a common element with architects who design housing development. So here it is, y'all. Who remembers Levittown? I remember seeing those pictures, the first big development that went in. So here it is, the first suburb, Levittown, New York. The lawn was a featured attraction at the Levittown development. The lawn monoculture propagated the homogeneity of the suburb. So y'all, until this thing went in, the lawn was kind of just for rich folks. But they made it a function now of the house. So along with the house now, you don't just look at the house when you're buying a house, you have to look at what the yard's going to be. So that now it became a function of so intensive suburbanization both concentrated and expanded the spread of lawn maintenance, which meant increased inputs of not only petrochemicals, fertilizers, fungicides, and pesticides, but also natural resources like water. Y'all, every year, and these statistics are old, every year there's about 20 million gallons of oil and gas spilt on the ground just filling up lawnmowers. That's more than the Exxon Valdez spilt. Every year, that's spilt on the ground just filling up lawnmowers. So let's talk about water, the most important thing that everybody's got to have. Lawns are the largest irrigated crop in the USA. A 2005 NASA study estimated there were 32,000 acres of irrigated lawn in the U.S., 3 times that of irrigated corn. By 2015, it was 40 million. The general guide to maintain a lawn is apply 1 inch of water per week. To provide your lawn with 1 inch of water, it takes a little more than a half gallon for every 100 square foot area. That's 6. So y'all, if I went to your yard and measured up a 10 by 10 foot area and just filled up 62 gallon jugs and laid it out there and showed you that if you want to that's what it takes for an inch of water for that 100 square feet. Extrapolate that. If I filled up gallon jugs and put them all over your whole yard, you'd feel ashamed of how much water you was putting out there for a crop that you cut and throw away. 12, in Dallas County, we use 70 million gallons of water every day. 80% of that went into the landscape. 80% of that went into 2 species of plants, Bermuda and St. Augustine. I usually just stop talking. People are like, what? Yeah, that's a lot of water for nothing. The average lawn size is a fifth of an acre. At that national average cost of $1.50 a gallon, 1,000 gallons would cost roughly $8.15 for every watering event, which is sinful. How can water be that cheap? It should be more expensive than gas, and water that goes into your house should be charged differently than water that goes into your yard. Water that goes into your yard should cost you about $100 a gallon. I bet them people that have them lawn sprinklers that go off when it's raining, I bet they'd stop that real fast because that makes me mad. It's not our water. It's somebody else's water. It's who has come behind us. Your kids and your grandkids' water. It's a finite resource. We're not making any more of it. We can't get any more of it. Big deal. Texas, 2016, the population of the state is approximately 28 million. The gallons per day, this is how much we use in Texas in 2016 per person per day. Look at that number. 3 billion, almost 4 billion gallons of water a day. That was 2016. How many of us are here now? And how many from California? Just send them right back. So in Texas in 2016, the municipal water use statewide was, how many gallons is that? Is that a trillion? 1,437,000,000? Yeah, that's a lot. And y'all, it's estimated that 50 to 75% of that is used for landscaping and most water lawns. And there's Dallas County's numbers. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the amount of water. So when you get in, when Pete Delkus is telling us on the Channel 8 News that Lake Levon is low, and you know, it's just because we're watering your lawn. Quit watering the lawns. Get rid of your lawn. Make it pollinator wildlife habitat. Make it edible food habitat. That should be your vegetable garden now. If you got enough sun to support flowering plants, you got enough sun to support food. Don't give your money to whole paycheck. Go buy a $5 head of lettuce. Grow that thing in your yard for the cost of a pack of seeds. You know, country people are kind of dumb too, because we think that, you know, spending $5 for something that should only cost you a nickel, that's stupid. Nobody in here is stupid. I'm not calling anybody stupid. If y'all go to Whole Foods and buy $5 lettuce, that's up to y'all. But also, goodbye to the wild. Why is that important to us? Because everything out there that keeps that wild has nothing to do. We don't have anything to do with any of that stuff. The bees and the butterflies and all the pollinators out there. It's a big deal to lose that wild space out there. You know, sitting in my car this morning waiting for this place to open up, and there's a fence line out there that's still got hackberries on it and some juniper out there. It's a little edge effect out there. There was I counted about a dozen species of birds out there working that edge this morning, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this fence line won't be here long, and when it is gone, where are these birds going to be foraging at? They need that. Just that one little line of fence line out there was providing tremendous habitat, and that's nothing. So the typical protocol, here's what's going to happen, y'all, when the housing people come. They scrape and replace. They scrape everything down to bare dirt, and then what gets put back there is not native. It's lawn and some kind of non-native tree and some kind of crummy shrub. That's what you get. Non-functioning stuff. Or if it is native, it's non-functioning native. It's some kind of hybrid or something that's been bred so that it stays pretty a long time but doesn't have any pollen and nectar anymore. Our wildlife can't function on that plant. The lawn is a monoculture of death to our native fauna. Lawns do not support our native pollinators and other native insects. The two biggest threats posed by lawns are water loss and the loss of biodiversity. The coevolution between native pollinators and native flowering plants is profound. That relationship supports practically every terrestrial ecosystem on Earth. Y'all, I lost an 80-acre prairie of mesquite this year. It took them about a week to just scrape it all loose. And last year, I was saving some plants out there. And one of the plants I was saving was a plant called Astragalus crassicarpus, little ground plum, little native legume. And while I was fixing to dig this plant up, a little native bee came to that flower, and I watched this happen. A little bee was about half the size of a honeybee and real skinny, but it fit perfectly in this astragalus flower. And the first thought in my head was, no European honeybee will ever pollinate this flower. It's impossible. The bee is too big. It just can't go in there. Y'all, that example could be repeated millions and millions of times. We have got to maintain this habitat and maintain our native bee populations because they support our North American habitat, okay? It's not the European honeybee. That's fine if you want almonds and some other crap that we don't rely on every day. I mean, y'all, almonds, I like them, but it takes about 7 gallons of water to produce one almond. And that's what the European honeybee is used for. They truck them around all of these farms in California mostly. I like almonds, but that is not a staple crop, okay? And there's a lot of water going into that, so there's just a lot of stuff. Y'all, somebody's going to have to be assigned. It's you, sir. You are assigned to this task, a very important task. I'm going to go off on a tangent, and it's his job to pull me back to where I was originally. So what was I talking about before I went off on that tangent, Ray? Are y'all starting to kind of get it, though? What I'm trying to get to y'all is, okay, y'all, the lawn only looks green. More chemicals are applied to residential lawns than are applied to agricultural lands. Like I said, farmers and ranchers, they usually farm big, lots of acres. Chemicals are expensive. It's hard enough being a farmer or rancher these days already. They're not going to spend a lot of money on stuff they don't need. But you go to Home Depot about a month from now, and you watch the white 50-year-old, 40-year-old, 30-something men trucking out bags and bags of Scott's Spectrum, right? One bag will work, but we got to buy 10 bags. We put out more stuff as homeowners than all the other folks combined almost. So 2005 EPA estimates 71 million pounds of active pesticides applied to lawns annually. That's where your babies play. That's where your pets go outside. So you wonder why your little Fluffy came in and had a seizure? Yeah, because Kimlawn just got through treating your lawn with some kind of damn poison. 17 million gallons of oil and gas spilled filling lawn care equipment. I mean, it's a very dirty industry taking care of your lawn. The most efficient gas-powered lawnmowers produce the same amount of emissions as 12 cars. So you start up 12 cars out there in one lawnmower and let them run for an hour, and that lawnmower is going to put out more pollution than all those cars put together. Bigger mowers are less efficient and produce more toxins. The font color is as close as I could get to the strata of exhaust haze I regularly see in the Park Cities on a summer Saturday morning. About this far off the ground will be that exhaust from those two-cycle string trimmers and blowers. And y'all, I dare you to hear one darn thing while men are running blowers, weed eaters, and mowers. And these blowers produce winds in excess of 200 miles per hour. If you're a little bitty tiny spider and somebody comes along with a blower, you just got blown all the way across the yard over there and probably dead doing it. Water, air, and noise pollution are all allies of lawns. I'm the American mistress. In 2008, Americans spent nearly $40 billion on lawn care, and none of that for allowance for their kids. Y'all think about that. That's how I made my first quarter as a kid, was mowing my lawn. And I never see the kids who live in the house mowing the lawn. They're inside on the couch with a phone in their hand while Jose's out mowing the lawn. That's a problem. I don't have anything against Jose, but I have a problem because our kids are lazy now, and there's just a nature disconnect with our kids now called nature deficit disorder, which I hate those kind of terms because some guy from Harvard thought that up and spent $10 million studying it. And it's like, no, I don't need to spend any money. Just dump a pile of dirt in the yard, take their phone away, and tell them that's their toy. And after a while, watch them. They'll get it. They'll start digging tunnels in it and playing in it like kids used to do. That's another talk, how to raise your kids. From a guy who never raised a kid, the expert. So in 2018, we spent nearly $4 billion purchasing lawnmowers. The average American spends nearly 70 hours annually on lawn care. Not gardening, just the lawn. The average charge to mow is between $30 and $45. That might be a low number. I don't know where I got that. Mowed weekly in the summer, every other week in the fall, that's about, you're going to spend some money to take care of this lawn. Again, it's going to cost you money. But what can we do about this? Doug Tallamy says it's nature's best hope. I'm telling you it's not. Because we can never have the diversity, and you can't replicate the diversity in your lawn that a wild prairie has. That's our best hope, but we can't seem to recognize that, except it's only good for houses. But our second best hope is what can we do? Because look at 40 million acres that we control. Let's just convert all that to native habitat, and we'll be on a lot better course. First thing I'd say is get rid of your lawn as fast as you can. Now in Mesquite, where I live, they require you to have 30% of your landscape has got to be lawn. which I think is not very smart, but so you got to have some. Bermuda, St. Augustine, or both, something else. They all need sun. But if you got enough sun to support Bermuda and St. Augustine, you got enough to support buffalo grass, which is our native turf grass, which gets hot in the summertime and it just turns brown. You think it's dead. It's not. Our fall rains come, it greens it right back up. There are alternatives. We have native ground covers that you can use. There's options to the turf grass. How to get rid of it. Bermuda is not easy, but you can solarize it. You can smother it out. They all need sunlight. If you could just separate them from the sunlight for long enough, you will kill it. St. Augustine is easy because it's all stoloniferous. Everything's above ground. You can just rip that off, physically remove it. So there's ways you can do this. Remove the top. Again, with Bermuda, you'd be putting cardboard, plastic, or both down. Put down compost. And then if you're doing this, like I say, okay, I'm going to go home right now and start taking out my lawn, Randy. Well, here's what you're going to do. Do this part that gets rid of the lawn and plan for a fall installation. Fall is when you should be planting most of your plants anyway. I know that spring's coming, everybody's ready to get outside, all the nurseries are having their sales, but y'all, spring lasts about how long here? About 5 minutes, and then we're hot. It's that, y'all, if you're in clay soil, that's really the problem. If you're in shade, not really an issue, but if you're in clay soil where you got to keep going back out and re-wetting that soil constantly, you're going to drive out your air. It's going to start giving you problems, even with native stuff. So I tell people, do your planting in the springtime, enjoy walking around and smelling everything. Save your work for the fall. That's when your stuff should be going in. But in the springtime, you can expand existing beds and create your new beds. Get them ready for the fall. Sorry about that. Y'all, the trophic trifecta, leaf, nectar, and pollen. What is a trophic level? A trophic level is just a feeding level. The more of those you got, the more complex your system is, the better off you are. So I'm going to give you an example of that. Grass is growing up. Rabbit comes along and eats the grass. That's one trophic level. A hawk comes along and eats the rabbit. Now you got 2 trophic levels. I don't know of anything that eats hawks, but if something came along and ate that hawk, there's another trophic level. And then within that scenario, you've got little beetles. A bird comes along and eats that beetle. That's another trophic level. Your cat, who's not supposed to be outside, catches the bird. That's another trophic level. Then the coyote comes along, which is supposed to be outside. He eats your cat. It's another trophic level. So the more of those levels you got, the better off you are. You know, this is funny too, because am I going to get snakes? Well, I hope if you're lucky. Well, so I was talking to this lady in Georgia when I worked at Texas Discovery Garden. She called me and talking to her, and I thought I was talking to Scarlett O'Hara. Her accent was so wonderful. And we started off talking about monarch butterfly gardening, so hosting nectar plants. We got talking about the nectar plants, though, was why we was back and forth. Oh, Randy, I love that flower. It's so beautiful, and the smell is wonderful. But when I got to the host plants, she wasn't talking to me, and I thought I'd said something, which I can do. Y'all get a feel for me right now. I can upset some folks. And I said, ma'am, have I said something to upset you? She's like, no, but I want the butterflies, but I don't want them caterpillars. I said, well, ma'am, you got to have them caterpillars before you get the butterfly. So y'all, something's going to come along and eat your plants, and that's what you're looking for, because now we're talking about what? Y'all, 40-50% of our native insects are phytophagous. They eat leaves. That's a coevolution between leaf chemistry and that insect. The plants aren't just out there as just to lay, just come and eat me. No, they don't. I want to be eaten. So they have defenses. They got big stickers to keep stuff from eating them, or they produce chemical compounds like milkweed does. The sap on milkweed is milky latex. It's gummy. That's not good to put. We eat some Elmer's glue. As kids, it was great, but as adults, not so great. So eating Elmer glue is like eating the sap. So there's defenses against that. But you won't, like I say, but you want some, and y'all, here's the way it'll manifest itself. If a native insect is working one of your native plants, you're going to see some holes in the leaf. If it's something that's not native, usually it just eats the whole plant. Now, there are exceptions, like monarch butterfly. He'll eat every bit of that milkweed plant. So there are a few exceptions, but most of the time you'll see the plant just getting picked at, and usually that's something good. You want that. But remember this, 86% of all angiosperms are insect pollinated, and they co-evolve with their native flora. Install native plants to support our native insects. They are the foundation for almost every ecosystem on Earth. Y'all, bees are the most important group of pollinators. They are obligate flower visitors. They rely only on pollen and nectar as both adult and larvae. They are obligated to flowering plants. Y'all ever see this activity? You usually see it on red buds. Roses get a lot of this. This is our leafcutter bees. They use these to form the partitions between their egg chambers. So that they're not eating that leaf, they're using it for their nesting. So people would run out and spray that leaf if they don't want something's eating it. No, they're not eating that. That's a different type of activity. So here's some other practical, easy things you can do. Garden organically. This is how it all evolved. There's no sides, no herbicide, no pesticide, no fungicides. Y'all feed the soil. Everything above ground out there, all the plants are totally reliant on soil biology. No soil biology, no bacteria, no fungi, no protozoans, no plants, no people, and then no people. Remove the non-native invasives. Don't be a nursery for non-natives to pollute you or your own surrounding landscape. So if you've got privet, ligustrum, chinaberry, get rid of them. Birds eat those and they carry those seeds off and spread them around. Put native seeds in your bird feeder. But the birds eat that seed, and when they go around, and in your guerrilla native garden, that bird's going to poop that seed out and spread it all over the place, just like it should be doing. That's guerrilla gardening at its finest. Your next door neighbor doesn't want natives. Put native seed in your bird feeder. They're going to get some natives whether they like them or not. Install native plant. The easiest and most profound thing you can do is go get a native plant and put it in your landscape. Y'all have done 2 episodes of Ask This Old House. On the last one, we were in Fort Worth. We took everything. There wasn't much to start with. The backyard was empty. When we staged the plants, started putting plants on the ground where they were going to be planted, there was an echinacea that was in bloom, and it had a water feature there. The little galvanized tank with four plants in there. I hadn't set that echinacea down on the ground 5 minutes. There was a butterfly on there, and y'all, in about the same amount of time, there was a dragonfly. If you watch that episode, you'll see these insects. When I said, there's already a skipper butterfly on that echinacea. Look, there's a dragonfly over here. The producer goes, Randy, did you bring those in a jar? I swear he did. I said, no, I didn't. But there it is. You build it, and they will come. Put it in there. And y'all, but remember, well, we'll get to that. Genetics matter. The best success will come from plants which evolved in your region. Hand collect your seeds for high diversity. Y'all, the genetics matter. I don't know how many different varieties of Echinacea purpurea there are out there right now, but at least 100. When these plant breeders start breeding for something like we want the plant to be taller or a more vivid color or a different color than naturally occurs, you're going to lose some characteristic. When I was at Texas Discovery Gardens, I was buying the old-timey Penta for the butterfly house because it produced nectar all the time, easy to grow. They came out with one called the Graffiti Penta, which was much shorter. And I said, well, I could use that some places, a much shorter one, didn't get 3 feet tall. I put those out, and I watch my plants. I observe them to see what goes and what works them. I never saw one thing nectaring on that little short Penta. So when they bred that plant to get it short, they lost the nectar. So forget that. Just go back to nature, what nature offers, and that's the straight stuff. I'm not talking about my nursery, but what makes my nursery different than almost anybody else out there is, number one, I don't ever consider my time when I'm getting paid to do this, because I go collect my seed from prairie remnants. So I take the time to go out and collect this wild seed. I bring it back in. I treat this seed for whatever it needs to germinate. I grow this plant. So when you come to my nursery, like I was doing some straightening up here yesterday, I've got 300 rattlesnake master, Orangium yucifolium. Every one of them are seed grown. Every one of those plants are genetically different. They're the same species, but look in this room. Every one of us are Homo sapiens, but look at the genetic expression. Look at the differences. The same thing in the landscape. That's the kind of diversity we're looking for. So, and you know what? You don't have to drive to Florida, but if you can, while there's still some country out here, get out there and collect that seed yourself. That's where you're going to find real diversity and real good genetics. It's a big deal. Because y'all, the nursery industry is like this. Here's what it is. Somebody somewhere is growing what they call liners. And these are about 2 inch by 2 inch by about 5 inches. It's a big, long, skinny thing. Man, there's a great nursery in Austin called Far South Wholesale Nursery, and their diversity of their list they offer is off the charts. So I know the owner down there, and I was asking them, do y'all grow y'all stuff? Some of it. Most of the stuff they get is liners. It's a pre-grown little baby plant that you buy. They just take that thing, they pop it into a 1-gallon pot, they put Miracle-Gro fertilizer on it, and in about 6 weeks, they're selling you that plant. So I asked, well, where do you get your liners? Most of their liners come from California. What in the... I don't know. Look, you're on black clay here. You better have something that evolved in black clay. Little blue stem is a native grass that grows from Canada all the way down into Mexico. My partner, John Snowden, my business partner, he got some little blue stem from Minnesota and grew it out, germinated it, and got that plant down here and put it in clay soil, and in 4 weeks it was dead because it rotted. Now, we got little blue stem that grows down here all over the place, but it evolved in our soils and our climate. That's what you're looking for. So that's one of the things I'm real proud about our nursery. Over there, I've got over 100 species of flowering plants, and most of them you'll never see in a nursery because it's stuff that I go collect from the field. Like my echinacea is Echinacea angustifolia. That's our native coneflower around here. Purpurea occurs up around Texarkana. It's not even really native to this state for the most part. Let's get back into this now. Pollinator conservation begins and ends with habitat. Creating effective habitat for pollinators is easy. Diversity first and last. If you just have high diversity in your landscape, you're going to cover all the bases. You don't have to know any technical things. You don't have to know any scientific stuff. You just get high species diversity in your landscape. You're going to start solving these problems. Your habitat needs to be native-centric and local genetics if you can. What I mean by native-centric, look, my grandma got me into gardening, and she loved irises, the old-timey irises. Now, that is not something I consider invasive. Will it grow and expand? Yeah, at a glacial speed. It's never going to take over an area like Queen Anne's lace or scabiosa will. So I have iris because it connects me to my grandma. It makes me feel good. But if she liked Chinese pistache, that would be one that my grandma loved that I would not tolerate. It's so invasive. So you can use non-native stuff. It just can't naturalize here, and it can't escape and become invasive. Habitat design principles. Increase the diversity using seeds. My nursery would probably be an exception because I got over 100 species. But if you go to the best native plant nursery around here, you're going to probably see about 30 species of native plants. That would be high. Most of them about 10 or 15. Autumn sage replicated over and over again is not what I'm talking about. It's native, but we need more diversity than that. If you really want diversity, you're going to have to go to seed. Okay? Spice it up with herbs and edibles. You know what? Your yard, your landscape should be growing food too. It should. It just should. Better for you. And herbs, great small flowers, great for pollinators, and I never see catmint escape my yard and get out into a field and take it over. Lots of edge. Y'all, if you're going to start a garden, let's say this screen is going to be your garden space, the edge, like I described a while ago, is a very high impact biological area. All it is an area where two things change, where low grasses come, and then you have a taller grass, or taller grasses transition into hedges or something. Just where you have a change in stuff. So you can increase that edge by making curved borders. So if you got, let's say that's 10 foot long, if I make that a sine wave along that edge, I may now have 15 or 20 foot edge instead of 10. So make those edges curved, no straight edges. Install in colonies. Insects find resources by color and by scent. If you're a little bitty tiny insect and you're looking for a yellow flower, and this whole room is a big bed, you got one yellow flower at that corner and one over here, he may not find it. The other important thing about that is pollinators exhibit a behavior called flower constancy. It means when a species is offering flower and nectar, when it's blooming, and even something else of a different species is blooming right next to it, watch them. They will very rarely go from echinacea to rudbeckia. If they're on echinacea, they're going to be going to that echinacea. And the insects have co-evolved to know that when the echinacea store is open and it's giving pollen and nectar, I don't care about the rudbeckia store. I mean, that's the grass is greener. You see cows with their head through the fence eating grass when they got it. I mean, insects won't do that. They'll stay on that flower. So install your stuff in colonies. You got echinacea, don't put one here and one way over there. Put them in, they don't have to be right next to each other, but kind of group them close together. With host plants, it's even more important. If you're a piece of milkweed growing in this room right here, and I'm a monarch butterfly, and I just ate that milkweed, it's all gone, and I got to find more milkweed because I'm only in my third instar, and the next milkweed plant is way over there, and there's 100 plants between me and that plant. I'll never find it. So install your host plants, especially where the caterpillar can find the next plant pretty easy, and y'all be diverse. Be diverse. So we've basically got 3 kinds of flowering plants. One-timers, things that pulse, and then things that I call can-till-can't. Your one-timers are plants like echinacea. They're going to come up and bloom in the spring, and then they don't bloom again. Then you got things that pulse. That's like lantana, autumn sage. They'll be in bloom for 4 to 6 weeks. Then they'll be out of bloom for about another period of time. Then they come back in. They do that all through the season. And then you got your can-till-can'ts. Them are the ones that once they start, they don't stop till frost. Greg's mist flower is a good example of that one. Anisacanthus is another one. So if you've got high plant species diversity, you're going to have some of all these different kinds of plants in your landscape. The idea is from start till stop, you got something flowering in your landscape all year long. That's a goal for aesthetics and for the functioning of it too. Because let me tell you something, I don't care what kind of fancy wood or how pretty the table is. If there's no food at it, I'm not going to sit down there. Your lawn will not be inviting to these pollinators if, I'm great in the springtime, but through midsummer, I got nothing. That's when you throw your ironweed and your silphiums and your stuff out there. Your rudbeckias, those go right through the middle of summer. Y'all, this is that strip between the street and the landscape that you don't own, but the city says you must maintain. How'd they work that? Well, this is what I did. I just took it over by throwing some Menard and some Gaillardia out there. A few other points to consider. Where am I at, Jacqueline? Oh, 5 minutes. Well, here's a few other points to consider. Forget that slide, and let's get into some slides and some flyers. So some stuff, some options for you. All right, Brandy, you got me ripping out my lawn. What can I put in? This is buffalo grass, frog fruit, and horseherb. This is growing in a field in Mesquite on a remnant prairie. If you got a full sun, there you go. If you got shade, throw the frog fruit and the horseherb in there and see what that'll do. Throw some little violas in there, some lyre leaf sage, some Gulf Coast pin stemmon. If it's too shady to grow grass, you can grow some stuff. You can grow flowering plants. But here's some options for you. Sedges. This is another option. There's a sedge in my backyard that came up on its own under a black walnut tree, so it can take sun and shade and those jugglins that the walnut tree produces to keep other plants from growing underneath it. This sedge just went right through there. Beautiful texture. I love that thing. Evergreen. These little sensitive briars, these little ground covers. You got this one and you got that one. Those two run right along the ground. They get up about 4 inches when they bloom. These are can-till-can'ts. So have this all summer long into fall. This will be your lawn instead of green grass. There's frog fruit, just to give you an idea about how little that flower is. That's in the verbena family. Verbena is a great nectar plant. That's for a little bitty tiny insect. Our beneficials would go to that. The ones who give us our organic pest control, our little syrphid flies, they would love that flower. Cactus, look at all the pollen on that white-faced bee. Great. Passion vine, the host plant for our fritillary butterflies. Y'all, common name, botanical name, and that V came up with a very sophisticated naming system. The V means vine. P means perennial vine. There's our native. Another thing too, you got a certain kind of thing you want to attract to your yard. If you like hummingbirds, get you an orange or red tubular flower going, and watch the hummingbirds come on in. Datura, y'all think about this too. The species, this is primarily moth pollinated, as are yuccas and a few other things. Consider the moths, okay? We don't think about that because nighttime, we're not out there. But for y'all, this is not a real number, but good enough for the point I'm trying to make. For every one species of butterfly, there's about 100 species of moths. Moths are incredibly diverse. And if you're a good pollinator, you got fuzz, you're fuzzy, or you're squatty, you're low to the ground because you could be on the flower, you got to pick that pollen up. Moths, very important pollinators, way more important than butterflies. Anyway, there's a yucca, beautiful thing, moth pollinated. Y'all, if milkweed occurred naturally where you live, get native milkweed and put it in your landscape. It's probably one of the most, it's a keystone genus in the landscape. Y'all know what a keystone is? Remember the arch bridges, the stone bridges? Remember that stone right in the middle? If you take that keystone out, what happens to the bridge? Collapses. You take milkweed out of the landscape and the ecosystem starts collapsing. This dude here, Patrick Darley, went out and what he did, he looked at one milkweed plant, the same plant. He looked at it for 8 hours a day for 1 week. And after the end of that week, he reported over almost 500 species of insects going to milkweed. So I would start with that one. If you want to have some insects come to your yard, let's just go with milkweed to start out with. Look at green milkweed right here, probably the most common species of milkweed around us. Look at the diversity. There's monarch butterfly. This is antelope horns milkweed. Y'all, the little blue flower, that's the one I'm talking about. I grow it, but you're not going to find that at Callaway's. They're not going to grow Scutellaria drummondii because there's not enough people will buy it. But the big stuff I call the bricks. The little stuff I call the mortar. You got to have them both for that thing, for that wall to be sound. And you got to go collect that seed yourself or go to some nut like me who crawls around his hands and knees. That's a very difficult seed to collect. Now here's the deal with nectar. You big monarch or butterfly guy. Milkweed is a springtime phenomenon. After July, it's done. They're done with it. Then it becomes a nectar issue. Make sure you've got good nectar and fall nectar. Diversity, diversity, diversity. Did I mention that yet? Avoid the hybrids. Rebuild your system. What's that mean, y'all? We've been prairie up here before Europeans came, so that's the species you need to be looking to put back in your yard, whatever made up this blackland prairie. With that, you're going to get succession. That's where if one species goes out of bloom, another one follows it. Like when our echinacea goes out, here comes our pinstem. And right after that, here comes our dahlia. Right after that, here comes our veronia. Remember the one-timers, pulsars? Fall nectar is critical. Packing in. What's the one thing you're going to remember from this talk? You can forget every other word. Diversity. That covers everything. You don't have to be Doug Tallamy. You don't have to be me. You don't have to be anybody. You just got to know I need high species diversity. Native species diversity. Agarito, blooming right now. Smell it forever. Beautiful edible fruit. Here's pinstem and cobea, big old giant flower. Bumblebee pollinated. Here's astragalus. There's that little flower I saw that native bee crawling into that no European honeybee will ever pollinate. There's our prairie verbena. That's one that has been hybridized in lantana, and echinacea have probably been hybridized more than any other plants. Try to go back to this. Zizia aurea, here's one that is a host plant for our eastern black swallowtail. So, and that compound umbel, that flower form is highly attractive to beneficial insects. There's our echinacea right there on some virgin prairie and rock wall. Been in the family since the mid-1800s. There's autumn sage. Comes in about 100 different colors. There's Monarda citriodora, and right there with it is purple prairie clover. Took me about 10 years to learn how to germinate that seed, and finally I can offer that clover to people. There is that is an annual Monarda. You got that A beside it. There is our perennial Monarda fistulosa. Both of these are highly medicinal as well. I'm making tinctures out of these native plants now. There's a little skipper butterfly. Y'all look at that. Low to the ground, low to that flower. Got some fuzz on it. Good. He can carry some good pollen. Monarch butterfly, terrible. Long, stilted legs, away from the plant, no fuzz on its body. Where's it going to carry pollen at? Either bees carry it on specialized structures on their legs. Pollen is electrostatically charged. It will actually jump off the plant onto the insect. There's Greg's mistflower, Eupatorium gregii. If you've ever seen the monarch dynamic in the fall with these guys, it's incredible. Flamacanthus is another one. Forget your hummingbird feeder. Sugar water. Would you feed your kids sugar water? Well, yeah, you would. those juice packs, all that sugar water. This is what they want. And y'all, when this runs out, they go. When you keep your feeder up, when they're supposed to be migrating, you're making them hang around. Oh, my bow, it got cut. Well, if you'd have had native plants in your yard feeding your stuff, they will follow that cycle, and they'll go when this goes. They go. They get pushed away. You put that feeder up, and they stick around. And that's when they start having problems. There's your purple prairie clover. Look at that big old bumblebee. Bee brush, y'all, this one right here, for a little tiny flower, if I had one plant in here and brought it in here, in 5 minutes it'd fill the whole room up with the most glorious scent. I call it Scentalicious because you want to eat it. It smells so good. Mexican hat, you kill everything you grow. Here's one you can't kill. There's another one you can't kill because it grows in most full sun or the deepest shade you got. Hummingbird pollinated. Look at that. See now there. Look at them. Look at the leaves. See, you can see some been working the edge of those leaves, but it's not tearing it up. That's probably a native beetle working that. Does that mean you got a hot, dry location? There you go. Texas lantana. I have to say, even the hybridizers, most of them are still pretty good nectar plants, but this is the one that we have here. This is the one you should be going for. Y'all, another thing too, this is cool. When that flower first opens, it's yellow. Once it gets pollinated, it turns orange. That's why you got two different color flowers on lantanas. So those insects won't waste their time on that orange one. Big red sage, that yellow E at the end of that means it's a Texas endemic. Evolved in Texas and only naturally occurs in Texas. Rattlesnake master, that's the one I told you about. This is an indicator species. If you see it, it means it probably has not been plowed. It's probably untouched. Doesn't mean it's not compromised, but it probably hadn't been plowed. Rough stem rosinweed, here's one of the ones that'll go right through the middle of summertime when nothing else is blooming. I think I grow about 5 different species of that. Native bee on there. Ironweed, here's another one blooming through the middle of our hot summers. It's a big, beautiful purple flower. You can see it forever. Oringo, this is a late fall bloomer. It's an annual, but attracts a high diversity of insects, high diversity. The aster family is probably the most diverse of all the angiosperm families. There are many species in Texas. Get as many as you can find, a great fall nectar source. There's 2 species of aster occurring out in the field, naturally occurring. That's a queen butterfly and a little European honeybee on there. Gay feather, here's another fall bloomer. Maximilian sunflower, all of these are good. This one right here gets about 12 feet tall. Had the code guy come and get on to me one day. He says, "Can't you make that shorter?" I'm like, "No." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because it wants to get this tall." How am I supposed to make it shorter? Blue pitcher sage, fall migrating monarch right there, nectaring on it. All of our goldenrods, the solidagos, are extremely powerful. Frostweed, here's another one that's just a fantastic plant. If you've ever seen the dynamic of this plant in the fall when stuff's migrating through, it's just incredible. Butterflies are normally timid, shy, they're pacifist creatures, but I've seen them get into bloody fistfights over this flower right here. So here's the deal, y'all. We can be a positive in garden club. Look at all the people in here. Look at all the gardeners in here. Look at I'm going to tell you what kind of influence you got, and it's big. You can be a positive influence on the native pollinator-plant relationship just by getting natives and putting those in your yard instead of the hydrangeas and the other stuff. Every native plant installed or native seed sown makes a big difference and begins the healing. So what legacy are we going to leave our children and the generations to come behind us? You wouldn't think that the choices you make of plants you buy to put in your landscape are going to affect any generations yet unborn. That's kind of that's what preachers tell you when they want your money. You got to do this or this is going to happen. Well, I'm telling you, I don't want your money, but I'm telling you, it's going to happen. So we influence their fate with the plant species we decide to install on the ground that we manage. So that's another thing too, on the ground that we manage. I'm talking to the city of Mesquite right now. The most money that the city of Mesquite spends every year is on mowing. So what we're fixing to do right now is one thing I saw was they mow right down to the creek's edge, which is bad for flooding. It's bad for runoff. So what we're going to start putting the native grasses back on these creeks to keep these guys from having to mow. And we're going to start pulling back this no mower. We're going to start saving, hopefully, the city millions of dollars every year while at the same, to the citizens and their tax money, at the same time creating this, improving water quality, creating pollinator habitat. It's a win-win for everybody. So on ground that we manage, so all around this convention center should be native plants. Could come in here, we could bring kids over here and educate them, could show citizens what native plants will grow around here. Well, here they are, and here the city is doing what the city should do, be an example and a leader for us, is showing us the way to go, right? So here's what you do. Go organic and native. They are the dynamic duo, but you are the implementer. So when y'all come to your meetings every month and you hear the speakers, if all you did was come and got your belly full and talked to Jan who you hadn't seen in a month, that's great. I love that. But you have got to take the stuff that you learn at these talks and implement them, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's where we make the difference. So y'all, I don't know why that came through that deal up there, but if y'all want I'm not a lawyer. I ain't going to charge you to call me or email me. Nothing against lawyers, unless there's none. Any lawyers in the room? Well, now I can be truthful. I hate lawyers. Lawyers are, point is, look, I'm here to help folks. If I could help y'all reach out to me, call me, email me. Information doesn't do any good if it just stays in somebody's head. It needs to be shared. I know Forney's a long way off, but I can promise you it's a nursery like you've never seen before. There's no mulch, there's no pot and soil, there's nothing. Not even a restroom yet. There's fence lines, depending on how brave you are. But we are a plant genetics repository. We go out, me and John, we go out, we collect this seed, we bring those plants back and we grow them. And then we sell them to y'all so y'all can have them. But that's what we're doing. We're saving the genetics, so we're doing things different. But y'all, let me just say before I get to the Q&A stuff, if you don't, what I've learned is, if you're not that smart, you don't have that much good stuff to say, you got to distract people with humor and trying to, or if you're being ugly. I cover both those pretty good. But I do have to say, though, thank y'all very much for number one, indulging my crummy jokes. And I know this was I was kind of getting on to you a little bit. It wasn't a feel-good talk, but I think it's important stuff that you need to hear and need to be aware of. But most of all, thank you for inviting me out to speak to y'all today. Again, it's a great honor to be put in front of people to speak, and thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it.